Hi, welcome to Hollywood Crime Scene. This is Rachel Fisher.
Hi, this is Desi Jedeikin.
We're up super late tonight recording this episode, and we have a lot to cover today. So I am just going to get right in with our Patreon poll news. You guys are selecting our episode for next week, and currently Phil Hartman is in the lead, so that's probably what we're going to end up doing for next week's episode. You guys picked it out of 6 options.
But there's still time to vote, so if you're like a Ramon Navarro fan
or a Cecil Hotel fan, you have until 5 p.m. Monday to vote.
Yeah.
So get on it if you want to vote. Most of you who are our Patreon contributors already have voted, which is really cool.
Yeah, just a few of you.
But we'll announce it tomorrow night. Okay, what are we talking about today, Des?
Okay, so I'm sure all of you people who sort of are fascinated by crime and Hollywood, already know that this week is season 2 of American Crime Story is starting, and the subject matter will be the assassination of Gianni Versace. This is a series that will be based on the book by journalist Maureen Orth that was called Vulgar Favors, and it's about Andrew Cunanan, Gianni Versace, and the largest failed manhunt in U.S. history. I'm going to be referencing some of her book throughout tonight's podcast. So anyways, I'm pretty excited for this thing. I actually, when we first started this podcast, this was what I had planned on doing for my first episode.
The first one we were going to do.
Well, you had picked the Wonderland Murders. So for the second week, I was going to do Gianni Versace, and I switched it to Fatty Arbuckle because I was like, oh, let me do a more old Hollywood one since Rachel did a more,
Correct.
From the past 30 or 40 years or whatever. Right. And it seems more modern, even though it's the 80s or early 80s, whatever. So I'm going to do it tonight because I feel hey, let's cash in on that publicity.
Can you believe it's also been 20 years, just over 20 years?
That's right. That's
wild.
Right. Yeah. It was actually a story that I was always sort of fascinated by. I don't know if you,
I was.
Also, yeah. So I guess this is kind of a little primer, which is how Martha Stewart told me to say it.
Wait,
so
she said primer instead of primer?
Yeah, if it's primer, it's paint. If it's primer, that's what you call it.
Let me just tell you something really quick. I know this is going to be a long episode, but Martha Stewart pronounces herb.
Right.
So,
you know what? I just have to.
And in the words of my mother, whenever we watch Martha together, because we always did back in the day, she would say, "You're from New Jersey."
Right. Yeah, herb is really irritating. Anyways, this is going to be a 10-part series, not the podcast, but the
Jesus.
Yeah, the show. So I feel I'm going to get into it at the end, sort of what the show is going to focus on. So This is kind of a really good baseline knowledge of the show.
Of the case,
not the show. So let's get into Versace's background first. Gianni Versace was born in Italy, Reggio Calabria, on December 2nd, 1946. He grew up with his elder brother, Santo, and his sister, Donatella, who we all probably know. His mom was actually a dressmaker, so he kind of always had this inclination to kind of sew and had that kind of, background growing up. He actually had another sister who died at the age of 12. So it's this old school Italian craft, artisanal family he's in. He was very influenced by a few things growing up. One of them was ancient Greek history. And the other thing was the artwork of Andy Warhol, which I feel both of those things are very evident in his clothing line, if you're at all familiar. It has that kind of gaudy, the golds.
Well, the Medusa head, for one.
Yeah, the Medusa head, but also the bright colors of pop art.
Right.
Stuff like that. He actually began his apprenticeship at a very young age working in his mom's sewing business. He became interested in architecture and design at some point, and he eventually moved to Milan to work in fashion design. In 1973, he got his first job as a designer working for an Italian kind of a ready-to-wear company called Biblos. I think that's how you say it, which was a line of another, actually the Italian company's name is Jenny, and they're sort of like this popular design. So he worked initially for Biblos, which was like the young woman's line. And in 1977, he went to their more experimental line called Complice. He eventually did his own signature collection at the Art Museum of Milan, and he had his first fashion show in September of that year. He opened his first boutique in Milan in 1978. In 1982, he actually met his partner, Antonio D'Amico.
Don't even ask
Don't
me.
even. In that relationship, actually, and also I wanted to point out that Versace was openly gay practically his whole life, like, which I think is pretty rare for that period.
Yeah.
So in 1982, he met this guy, Antonio, who was a model at the time. And their relationship actually lasted until Versace's death. Before Versace died, he was actually diagnosed with cancer of the ear, which I find
I've never
incredibly
heard of
odd.
that.
I've never heard of that. But Antonio was like with him a long time and cared for him. He actually worked for his company at some point and became a head designer for sort of like some of the lesser, I don't know what they're called,
Like Versus?
yeah, Versus and Istante is the other one. He also was very close to his sister Donatella, and he had no children, but he sort of doted on his nieces and nephew, including Donatella's children, Allegra and Daniel. And Allegra was sort of
She was in the news for a minute.
Right.
Because she was battling an eating disorder.
right. That's sort of his little background segment. What did you think about Versace's fashion? Were you like a fan?
I was, and in the 90s, when my dad was doing really well in his business, he wore a lot of Versace. So I was definitely heavily exposed to the line and the
Right.
company, and I was really into it. I loved the bright colors. I loved the campiness of some of the outfits. I loved the runway shows were always so bright and sexy. Everything was like pure
was
sex
very sexy,
and very like Milan. And I promised like a tiny anecdote that my dad had for me about Versace that I'll share at the end. It's nothing, but he shared it over Christmas, and I'm like, well, we're gonna do that episode soon, so I'll bring that up.
Okay. We're all dying for it.
It's not that interesting, but it's an anecdote.
I mean,
from my
to
dad.
be honest, I'm like goth girl through and through. Although I liked the fashion shows, and there were some iconic red carpet type moments with some of his dresses.
Right.
It's not something I would ever wear.
There was a wedding dress, like, because back in the day, fashion shows, they always ended with a wedding dress.
Right.
And that's one of my favorite tropes of at least the old school fashion shows.
Yeah, I
is
like
they
that too.
They'd end with the wedding dress, and it'd always be very, couture or like avant-garde or
Right.
weird. And Versace's wedding dresses that he ended the shows with were always super awesome. Like there was a really like a glittery mini one that Kate Moss wore, and there was another one that Kate Mulder wore in 1995 that was all clear vinyl.
Right.
It was
no,
hot.
it was very showy.
Yeah, very showy.
I was always like, he also always said that Donatella was like his muse, which was
yes,
like,
that's really cute.
yeah, it was cute. Anyways, so Andrew Cunanan, let's go into his background a bit. He was born in National City, California, which I think is near Modesto, like in central California.
National City?
I don't know.
I don't know.
It sounds boring. No, I'm just kidding. Now I don't need an email
We don't
from
want to
any-
get an email from someone.
I'm sure it's lovely. So he was born to Modesto, Cunanan. Maybe that's why I thought it was near Modesto.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm very simple-minded. So I'm actually the joke. I'm the bad person. He was a Filipino American, and the mom is Mary Ann Schillaci, and she's an Italian American. He was the youngest of 4 children, and Modesto Cunanan was actually serving in the U.S. Navy at the time of his son's birth in the Vietnam War. I think he was born in 1969. In 1981, Cunanan's father enrolled him at the Bishop School in La Jolla. At some point,
Oh,
I
so
guess.
this is Southern California.
Yeah, San Diego. Well, I don't know where National City is,
Okay.
but
Well,
at some point they're
we'll
in
look
San
it up
Diego.
later.
Okay, it's a very important detail to the story. I'm just kidding. Everyone at school sort of remembers Andrew as being like very bright and talkative. He had a really high IQ of 147, which is
Wow.
like pretty
That's
up
pretty
there.
high.
He also started developing this reputation as being like a huge fucking bullshitter. Like he told a ton of tall tales and was always holding court with these fantastic lies. So he was like kind of already starting on his little path to be a con man.
Right.
But he also was like really adept at changing his appearance, and he started going by sometimes using the last name DeSalva. So it's like a lot of things was already sort of putting him on this path, like I said, of sort of being this sort of person who slips into worlds,
Right.
and no one really knows who he really is. And I think he wanted it that way. One of his former classmates, a man named Robert Aarons, described him a bit like this. I thought he'd be a very successful businessman, or maybe in the fashion industry, or just something really star quality like. He also remembered him as being good looking with a good fashion sense. He said Andrew would put dimes in his penny loafers. I don't know why I had to include that detail because I found it.
Because he thought it made him look rich.
Well, I just remember like people would put pennies.
Yeah.
But then some people started putting dimes. Like,
I don't remember.
Did you not have that?
But I remember penny loafers.
I actually remember wanting to do the dimes because I was like, oh, I like silver with black. Like that was
Right.
it wasn't like a rich thing. I didn't care.
Right.
I didn't really wear penny loafers. That was like, oh, if I do it, it's going to be this.
Right.
And he said he always had a little something extra. So he's like the original extra. He brought the extra. Okay. He also had this air about him that was sort of older than his years. Like,
Yeah.
So I picture this like, he's gay. And I think he was also openly gay. And the gay guys in my high school that I was friends with, they always were sort of like years beyond every other guy at school. Do you know
Right.
what I mean? Like I
Right.
was always friends with them for a reason, I think. Just because I could relate to them on like a higher level, maybe. So it seems like he was that type of guy, but a sociopath. So he was in this rich school, but he was actually from a very working class family and lived in sort of like the working class neighborhood.
Yeah.
And that's something that I feel like can fuck up even like a normal person, having
yeah.
to go from there to this rich school. And I actually did that one year of my life, but I didn't fucking care because I'm like, whatever.
Dude, my middle school and elementary school that I went to was so wealthy that we were the poor family,
Right.
which
Right.
is so
I had
fucked
that a
up.
lot in my life where I went to a rich school and I was middle class, but I was like, everyone had BMWs and I had like a
Yeah, it's
shitty
like
beat
fucking
up.
absurd.
Yeah.
It's not like, yeah.
So Robert Aarons, this high school friend, also said like no one knew anything about his family life. Like no one knew who his mom was, his dad was. They didn't even know he was half Filipino. Like he didn't talk about any of that. He kept everything like on the DL. He was the class of 1987, and his like high school thing was that he was voted most likely to be remembered, which
Well.
is like super creepy, right? His quote, his like senior quote was from King Louis the 15th, XV. That's 15th, right?
Yeah.
God, I am so trash. This accompanied his senior photo, and it was "Après moi le déluge." Please forgive my French, which means "after me the deluge."
What's the deluge mean?
I don't know. I probably should have looked that up, but it sounds kind of like heavy, right? According to this Robert, that quote turns out to be an omen. So I think deluge is bad.
We should look it up.
We should look it up. Please add us and tell us.
As we tell how we both got kicked out of high school.
Surprise, surprise. We both got kicked out of high school. We don't know anything. So a year after Andrew graduated from high school, his father actually faced embezzlement charges and fled the country, abandoning the family and leaving
Wow.
them broke, like even more broke, even broker. So that was the same year that Andrew's mother learned that he was gay, even though, like I said before, he was openly gay in high school and actually described as flamboyant. So he wasn't just like quietly gay. He was like, flaming gay. Is that even allowed to say that anymore? When she found out that he was gay, they had a huge fight. He actually threw her against the wall and dislocated her shoulder.
Jesus.
There was some kind of investigation into him or into his behavior after that incident. And it said that he suffered from antisocial personality disorder, which we know is sort of like a personality
Yeah.
disorder that sort of implies that you have a lack of empathy
Right.
or some kind of psychopathy to various degrees, right? He did enroll in college after he graduated high school at the University of California, San Diego. He majored in American history, and surprise, he dropped out. Shortly after that, I'm not quite sure about this. I kept seeing conflicting things in all the articles I was reading. I think at some point after that, he started going to San Francisco a lot. I have seen that he settled there, but then I've seen that he kind of goes back and forth between.
But he was in San Francisco for a time.
He was in there, yeah, for a time, but it did seem like he would go back and forth a bit in these ensuing years after he graduated. So I already mentioned that he had the alias he used, Andrew De Silva. He also lied about connections he had to rich and famous people. He told people that his mother was friends with Debbie Harry. That was like one of his lies.
That's pretty bold.
He also claimed to be Jewish when he was actually Catholic. So it's just like, I feel like this guy just lied about like everything. Like he didn't want anyone to know who he was.
Well, we've talked about that too on the show before, about pathological liars.
He was very well known in the gay community in San Diego and in San Francisco. He kind of walked in, he had like the entourage and he would like pay the bills. So I don't know where
was he getting this money from?
Well, there's like a lot of stuff written where I feel like he might have been dealing drugs. Like I feel like he might have been getting his money from drugs. So he was a big spender and very showy and made like a scene, and he had a reputation in these communities. And he clearly, not necessarily bad, but he was known. Like
he clearly wanted people to think of him as some kind of star or celebrity, associating with celebrities.
Or he at least wanted this illusion that he's had a lot of money. So he might have been like the type of person who blew all his money on tips, and even though he was like not eating or whatever, you know what I mean? Like,
but it was all about his image. Everything.
It was all about his image. Another brag that I thought was sort of funny because he kind of would deny his Filipino background, but then sometimes he would admit it and he would say that he knew Imelda Marcos. Sorry. I don't know why, that I was just kind of like, well, like, I'll admit that I'm Filipino just to do this lie, because it's like, okay,
like at any cost he will
like he's always figuring out like, when can I use this information, like when is it the best. Yeah, he's an opportunist. Another friend who comes up a few times in this work I did is a San Diego guy named Michael Williams who knew Andrew. He said that Andrew did his homework. He would investigate older, wealthy gay men who didn't have families, and he would place himself in those circles, and that was his living.
Wow. So
I have heard that he did sell drugs, but then this guy's also saying, well, he was a bit of a gold digger or whatever. So at some point, one of the sort of big mysteries of Versace's killing was why Versace?
Right.
And did they know each other from something? Like, and it was basically never really confirmed one way or the other. But this woman, Maureen Orth, who wrote the book that the series will be based on, she actually has a story that I'm going to tell you right now that they did meet at some time. So this is in, I believe, 1990. And he was in San Francisco, where I said before he was big on the scene, and he was in particular into like S&M party type stuff.
Yeah.
One of his friends actually, one of the first known incidents of him being sort of violent besides the mom thing, was at one of these S&M parties. He was with a friend named John Semerau, and according to John, at the party this night, he grabbed me around the neck so hard, he was choking me by his grip. I said to him, Andrew, you're really hurting me. Stop it. Something had snapped in him. Now I realized the guy was hunting. He was getting the thrill of the hunt, the thrill of the kill. I saw it in his eyes. I saw it in his body. He had stepped over the edge. Now that's also, I don't doubt the story, but it also maybe has a little bit of revisionist history. Like now
looking
that you know,
back on it.
Well, like, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's possible he felt like there was, you know, some dead eye, like craziness happening. But I'm sure it's like one of those things where you look back, you're like, oh, like that I could have gotten in that car. And you know what I mean? Like you look back and
it's creepier in hindsight.
Yeah. But it probably was creepy in
I'm sure. I'm sure it was fucked up.
But this is like
happening.
recalling it after everything is said and done.
Well, it's sort of like we talk about the Kaiser Sose moment.
Right.
When you discover that somebody is a terrible person.
Well, it takes on a new depth.
Yeah, you examine all the moments.
Okay. So around the same time in San Francisco, there was a San Francisco nightclub called Colossus, which I'm assuming is a gay club. But I don't know. Have you heard of it? No.
Look, I was a child then.
You didn't dream of going to Colossus when you grew up. Versace was in town because he had designed costumes for the San Francisco Opera. And so he went to this club, I guess, while he was in town.
Yeah.
At the club, he ran into Cunanan, who, and this is Cunanan's story, I think. He said to Versace that Versace seemed to recognize him, that Versace said to him, "I know you," and like wagged his finger at the 21-year-old's direction. "Lago di Como, no?" And Cunanan replied to him, "Thank you for remembering, Signor Versace." So I guess he had thought he had seen him at Lake Como, which is a sort of celebrity kind of vacation spot in Italy. And Cunanan kind of just went along with it. And he like bragged about this encounter to people at the time, saying, he said to Versace, "I said, if you're Gianni Versace, then I'm Coco Chanel." Like that was his little. So he was like telling this story. Right. Now, Donatella Versace, after her brother's murder, said that they had never met. So it's kind of like, I don't know if it happened or not.
Right.
But at the very least, it kind of proves that he did have some kind of fascination with Versace well before the murder happened. Yeah. Right. Okay. So around, in the early 90s, at some point, Michael Williams, the guy I mentioned before, the restaurateur from San Diego, introduced Andrew to a man named Jeff Trail. It was a weird friendship and they became very close, even though they were complete opposites. Jeff was a graduate of Annapolis, a Gulf War veteran living in San Diego. He was also gay, but kind of straight-laced and conservative. Yeah. Like he's military, but he's, he actually had appeared in a 48 Hours interview in 1993 talking about gay people in the military. So he was kind of like, a good guy and just sort of hooking up with Andrew. I don't know if they actually had a sexual relationship, but they were very close friends. Mm-hmm. Jeff would actually end up being Cunanan's first victim. At some point, while he was in San Diego, and this is why it was confusing where he was as far as San Diego versus San Francisco, he had like a going away party that he was moving to San Francisco. So I feel like maybe he moved back to San Diego and then was relocating again to San Francisco. Right. So he has this big going away party. In actuality, he had already bought a one-way ticket to Minneapolis, which was where Jeff Trail had moved at some point. Yeah. To kind of, to move, but also to get away from Andrew. It had become like a very bad, toxic relationship. Yeah. He actually had another ex-lover. This was actually an ex-lover who he described as his, the love of his life. David Masden also lived in Minneapolis.
So he was going back to see.
He was going to Minneapolis. He told both of these guys, "Hey, I'm coming for a visit." Neither one of them were happy that Andrew was coming. Like both of them had it up to here with Andrew. Wow. But he was kind of the person you just couldn't say no to, or they just were like, "Oh, like what are we gonna do? I'm gonna try to avoid him."
Andrew.
Yeah, like you know what I mean? It was like that kind of situation. It was not like, "Yay, let's go. We're gonna all party and hang out together." Right?
They're like, "How do we get rid of fucking Andrew?"
I did read something too where people speculated that Andrew was paranoid that those two lived in the same town and could talk about him, which is like
He's
fucking
such a
paranoid.
Fucking narcissist.
Yeah, total narcissist. And I also mentioned the drug dealing, which I think had amped up a bit at this time. And he had actually tried to get Jeff involved in some kind of drug scam. And that was also part of the reason that Jeff moved away. Yeah. Because Andrew, and he, like I said, he's like a straight-laced military guy. He's not going to get involved in illegal activity. So on Friday, April 25th, David Madsen, he was sort of like the more pushover one, picked up Andrew from the airport. They had dinner with a group of David's friends. And at some point during the dinner, Andrew was saying to him, "Show them what I got you. Show them what I got you." And he had brought Madsen a gold Cartier watch that was actually not new, so it was probably like a stolen.
It must have been.
Right. So it's kind of like a weird moment where it was sort of like inappropriate. Like, here's what I do to you. And it's like, and Andrew said it was a thank you for helping him turn his life around. So he's like very manipulative, like you said, opportunist and narcissist. During the dinner, Cunanan said that he had planned on returning to California Monday morning. He spent the night at Madsen's apartment that Friday night. And the next night, Saturday night, he was in Jeff Trail's apartment, which was like in the next town over. He was there at 10 a.m. Sunday. He actually took a message on Trail's phone from a friend who called about something. And he left it on a yellow notepad and signed it, "Love, Andrew." Jeff Trail actually at the time had a boyfriend named John Hackett, and that was Sunday was his birthday. So he had plans with his boyfriend to go out dancing that night. But he at some point told Hackett that he needed to talk to Andrew about something pretty important. It was only going to take like a half hour. The boyfriend didn't know what the conversation was about. He just knew that Jeff had to do some things, and then he was going to meet him at this dance club later. Hackett actually arrived at Trail's apartment at 6 p.m., and there was no sign of Cunanan or his bag. At some point, Cunanan left a voice message on Trail's voicemail or saying, "Give me a call because I'd like to see you." So it was already kind of like, wait, what? Like,
Right.
It was like he was trying to establish something, right?
Right.
So like I said before, it was, he had plans to go to the boyfriend's birthday party at this dance club, which was hilariously called the Gay 90s nightclub in Minneapolis. Okay. I'm sorry. I love our gay club collection. We do have to collect them all.
We need to make a list.
At some point, someone had seen Trail in his car between 9 and 9:15 on his way to this club where he was supposed to be 10 to 10:30. People who lived in Trail's apartment building said that they recalled hearing shouting and somebody saying, "Get the fuck out." They heard like thumping against the wall for 30 to 45 seconds. They heard water running. They looked out, one of the neighbors looked out his door and saw no one. Actually, this was in Madsen's apartment, not Trail's, I'm sorry. So on Monday, another neighbor saw Madsen in the elevator and a man matching Cunanan's description. And then another witness said that they saw the two men walking that same day, Monday. So Cunanan was still there Monday.
Yeah.
Trail did not show up at Gay 90s. I'm sorry. It's not funny, but Gay 90s just makes me laugh. I'm sorry. So his boyfriend Hackett started getting worried. He didn't know where his boyfriend was, and he never showed up at his birthday. He started calling hospitals and jails. This is very 90s also, paging Trail every 20 minutes. And then Trail did not show up for work, and that's when Hackett called the police. According to him, he said, "They advised me that Jeff was a big boy at 28, and that, we've all heard this, they can't file a missing persons report for 72 hours. Hackett was also sort of hamstrung by the fact that he couldn't call Trail's parents because they didn't know he was gay. So I guess he didn't want to call us the boyfriend.
Yeah.
So Monday night at 8 o'clock, Hackett went back to Trail's apartment, and it was literally just as it had left. There was no nothing looked disturbed. An upstairs neighbor did say they saw a man matching Cunanan's description in front of the apartment between 7 and 7:45 the night before, and heard voices talking. Tuesday afternoon at 1:45 p.m., two women who worked with David Madsen went to his loft because he didn't show up for work. When they knocked on the door, they thought they heard whispering, and they thought they heard a dog pawing and scratching, but no one answered. According to this woman, Laura Booher, We said in a very loud voice that we better call the police. I'm sure they heard me. At some point, the police arrived, and they didn't want to do a forced entry because they weren't sure if the dog would become aggressive and they'd have to shoot it. They left another message for the superintendent of the building to get a pass key to get into the apartment. And when the superintendent entered at 4 p.m., she saw a body wrapped in carpet. Blood was splattered all over the back of the door, and there were 2 sets of bloody footprints on the floor. She called the police, and the dog was absolutely fine, so it was like the whole thing was a mess. There was no feces or urine anywhere by the dog. Madsen's wallet and a bloody Banana Republic t-shirt were left behind, and they found 2 plates of rice in the refrigerator. A bloody household hammer was on the table by the door. So basically, the guy in the carpet had been beaten to death with a hammer and then rolled up into a rug and left in this apartment. And this is David Madsen's apartment. Another friend of Madsen's named Monique Salvetti came on the scene, and she saw the police swarming, and she said, I can identify the body. But the police didn't allow her to enter the crime scene. Tuesday night, Jeff Trail's parents had finally been contacted. They were actually at the hospital where Jeff's sister was giving birth. And Trail was not yet identified as the body in the rug, but he was the victim in the rug. It wasn't David Madsen. He was identified actually by his Marvin the Martian tattoo he had on his left ankle because his face was beaten pretty badly, right? He had been hit from behind, but his face was also bludgeoned with the hammer. He actually was wearing a Swiss Army watch at the time, and it stopped at 9:55 p.m., which is around the time he was supposed to be on his way to his boyfriend's, right? So Cunanan and Madsen at this point had vanished. People who were looking for Madsen actually became horrified because they thought he was missing, and now he was a suspect in the murder of Jeff Trail. And that was the police's first reaction to, this is Madsen, it's his apartment, the body's in his, it's like everything is like, and Cunanan wasn't in that area. He wasn't known in that area to be anything, like whatever. So Madsen's parents actually weren't told that he was missing at that point until late Thursday afternoon because he was considered a suspect. At some point, they were like taking in like tips, like people citing Madsen and Cunanan. The police actually went to stop to eat at a diner on Rush Lake, which is just like an hour north of the Twin Cities. And it was actually at this lake that Madsen's body was found in the tall grass out on the edges of the lake by fishermen on Saturday morning.
Wow.
He had been shot 3 times through one eye and in the back, in his head and in his back. His car keys were on the ground where his body was found, but his Jeep was gone. Madsen's body showed no sign of restraints, and his only defensive wounds were in his fingers, possibly because he had raised his hands to protect himself when he was being shot. The only link between Trail and Madsen was Cunanan. And a week after Madsen's body was found, ammunition was found in Trail's closet that matched the .40 caliber bullets that Madsen was shot with. The police asked, there was also another box of bullets with 10 bullets missing and an empty holster found in a duffel bag in Madsen's apartment. And at some point, the cops finally looked at the bag, and the identification tag on the bag said Andrew Cunanan.
Wow.
So the police were like a little inept here. Not that I'm judging police, because obviously we're looking back on things. But there was a few things they did that sort of delayed his capture.
Yeah.
Not checking the tag seems like a pretty simple one. They also, like I think I mentioned before, where they didn't enter the apartment because of the dog. Like a lot of people theorized that waiting for the superintendent to go into the apartment rather than the cops doing it in that moment.
Yeah.
They theorized that Cunanan might have been holding Madsen hostage at gunpoint when when the women knocked on the door and they thought they heard whispering or something. So it's possible that they would have found Madsen alive with Cunanan in the house if they had entered at that moment.
Right.
After Cunanan murdered these two men, he drove to Chicago in the Jeep of David Madsen and killed a 72-year-old man named Lee Miglin, who was a very wealthy real estate developer and lived in, I can't remember. Oh shit, what's it called? The Gold Coast, like Chicago's, like a very wealthy area in
Did
Chicago.
he know who this guy was?
That's another thing that's very unclear. There was speculation that he might have known Lee's son named Duke Miglin, who was in California and an aspiring actor.
Yeah.
But the family denies that they had any connection. And there's just no way of knowing. But it is sort of a random, why. This was a pretty brutal murder. Miglin had been found with duct tape on his hands and his feet. His head was wrapped in masking tape with a small hole cut out for his nose. His feet were bound, and his body was covered in plastic and brown paper. He was stabbed over 20 times with a screwdriver, and his throat had been sawed open with a hacksaw. I mean, it's like kind of a brutal murder, right? Like,
that's fucked up.
Seems a bit, I mean, I hate to say overkill, but like, well, that seems like something you would do to someone you had some real rage against
or needed information from.
I don't know.
Also, the wrapping of the tape and leaving a nose hole, that's like very S&M.
You know what? I was just gonna say that a lot of the cop stuff. There's a really good article. I'll try to link to it on our Facebook page that goes really into depth on Andrew Cunanan, and I just had to like eliminate a lot of it. But they go into a lot of the S&M stuff that he was really into that aspect of it, and that's like a prime example of people going into it for the wrong reason. Like 95% of people are fine and cool and it's just a thing they're into.
Yeah.
But there is this danger of people who are not good going into it S&M lifestyle for the wrong reasons. Right.
I mean, and those are people who would go into any situation.
Right. But it's not an indictment of the scene. No. But it's just like, you know, but that's why they have a lot of rules in that world. Well, and it's for a reason.
Right. The BDSM community in general is all about consent and being safe, and thoughtful,
and keeping those type of people out.
Yeah.
So Lee's wife Marilyn, actually, how he was found was he was supposed to pick her up from the airport. She was coming home from a business trip, and he didn't pick her up, which was like really unusual. She went home, and the house was a fucking pigsty. There was stubble from electric shaver in the bathroom sink. There was debris in the kitchen, melted ice cream. In Lee's library, she found a large slice of ham.
What?
I know, it's just like on the desktop, like and she was quickly like creeped the fuck out. Like something is not right here, obviously. Like her husband doesn't eat ham on the desk. Like, you know what I mean? Like, can you imagine walking into your house?
You'd be scared.
Yeah.
Well, you'd either be one of two. First, you'd be pissed. You'd be like, Lee.
Right. But if you hadn't never done that before.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
first
scary.
So she found a fake 9mm pistol in the bathroom, and that was when she called police. Police came and they found her husband, as we've mentioned, in the garage.
So they found
him. She didn't find him, which I guess is a small blessing. There was no sign of forced entry in the house. And this guy, I mean, obviously this is just friends' testimonials, was widely considered a good guy. Okay.
Well, what year is this? This is 97, right?
This is already 97.
Did they have Craigslist then?
I don't think so.
Maybe.
I have no idea.
Maybe just in San Francisco.
Oh, right. Maybe it just started.
Because I remember it for a long time.
I'm
just wondering why he
how he found this guy.
How he found this guy.
I didn't see anything that. The only thing I saw was the speculation with the son.
Maybe he saw him on a billboard.
Possibly. Or maybe it was just random.
Right.
So obviously all of this evidence showed that the killer had stayed a while.
He shaved.
I said a shave. He also had taken a bath.
He ate and left food everywhere.
So after this murder, I feel like I didn't see the why, but after this murder, I don't know if it was connected to this murder, but because of the two murders in Minneapolis, Cunanan was actually put on FBI's 10 most wanted list. So he was like,
He was
he was a
wanted.
known fugitive at this point in time. He did steal Miglin's car, and he also at this point the gay communities in San Diego were terrified because they knew who
They
this
knew
was
this
and this
guy.
guy could be coming back or whatever. So he took Miglin's car, and his fourth victim was actually completely random. There's literally no connection. It was a 45-year-old caretaker named William Reese, and he basically killed him to steal his red pickup truck. Reese was shot to death. At that point, the manhunt began focusing on finding Reese's truck, and Cunanan had gone to Miami Beach at this point. And he was basically hiding in plain sight. Like he was doing nothing to really disguise himself or hide out. Like to go to Miami, which I don't know Miami well, but I'm assuming it has a pretty big gay scene, right? Like,
Yeah.
so it seems like within the gay community, this was a big fucking deal. Everyone else at this point, I don't think even knew that this crime spree was kind of happening.
You think it even reached Miami?
I don't know that it did, but like I'm imagining like the gay community in San Diego, and like do these communities start talking to each
Well,
other?
they can't
or-
because it's the mid 90s
Right.
and they don't have social media.
Right. But I don't know. Like, I have no idea. I just know the gay community was freaked out in San Diego. So they were obviously being contacted by police and being interviewed. And
You know
et
us
cetera.
LGBTs, we've had
You guys
special
don't
radar.
all know each other?
We don't all know each other.
But, I mean, that was the early days of the internet.
Yeah, but it was just like weird random chat rooms and stuff.
Right. Well, I don't know.
I don't know. I don't think so.
anyways.
I think he saw the bird cage and was like, I gotta
right,
go.
the bird cage,
I gotta
yeah.
go to fucking Miami.
He even used his own name to pawn a stolen item.
What an idiot.
So he was like literally not a very savvy criminal.
just did not care.
I think he didn't care. So actually someone at a sub shop recognized Cunanan from America's Most Wanted and called the police, but they arrived too late. He had gone already. So that like would have stopped everything. That's just kind of like this weird thing. So he kind of escaped that thing that happened 4 days before July 15th,
Wow.
1997, when he approached his last victim, Gianni Versace. Okay, so Versace was shot and killed at the age of 50 on the steps of his Miami Beach mansion after taking a morning walk on Ocean Drive. His mansion is insane.
It's
by the way.
insane.
Normally, he would have had his assistant go to the coffee shop to get the morning papers and stuff like that. But for some reason that morning, he decided to go on his own.
This is all just seconds and inches.
Yeah. So Andrew Cunanan killed him actually with the same gun he would later use to commit suicide 8 days later. So basically, when Gianni Versace got shot, his boyfriend Antonio was inside the house with a friend, Lazaro Quintana. They were like in the dining room when they heard the shots, basically
From outside.
From outside. Lazaro actually went outside, and there were witnesses. Because I feel like in this area of Miami, it's people walking around. Like his house was not in some. It was like in the heart of Miami. Like
Yeah, there's
so people are
rollerbladers
walking
and
around.
shit.
Yeah, a woman was standing there, and she kind of witnessed the crime, or at least the aftermath of the crime, and she pointed in the direction that the killer had run. Like she saw the killer leaving the scene of the crime. Lazaro actually went after him on foot. And kind of followed him the best he could. At some point, the cops, came up and he yelled out information like he's got a gun. He turned up this alley. He came in front of a building where men were standing outside and asked them, "Did you see a man running by here?" And they pointed to a parking garage that was, within the vicinity of Versace's mansion. He told the police all this information. He's in this garage. Go get him. Go get him. And then, this was all over the radio at this point. Like, that's how fast this news kind of broke and got out. And it literally became a manhunt almost instantly. Police eventually searched this garage, which was called the 13th Street Garage, and they found a pile of clothes, a gray t-shirt, black shorts, which I think meant he had changed his clothes in the garage. No one knew who the shooter was at this time. They just knew what he looked like and what he was wearing, and that he basically vanished. According to one of the detectives, their initial thought when they came across the murder scene was that they thought it was a contract hit or related to organized crime in some way. And one of the interesting things I thought that I hadn't heard, the reason they thought this was because Gianni Versace, by him, next to the body was a body of a dead bird.
Whoa.
And that, according to this police detective, is the sign of a mafia hit. But it turned out that the bird was just in the wrong place at the wrong time and actually got hit by a fragment of the bullet that killed Versace. Isn't that crazy?
That's really crazy.
Yeah. So anyways, they found other items in this garage, including his passport and his ID. So they were able to, they knew who he was almost right away. Like I said before, the manhunt was on the loose. Miami was freaking out. There was a lot of celebrities living in this, in Miami at the time. Madonna lived there, and like Sylvester Stallone. And like, so people were fucking freaking out because this, like, at this point, everyone's like, a celebrity killer is on the loose in Miami. They didn't know about all the other things yet.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? About 9 days, or I saw 8 or 9 days. So maybe if you're counting the day he was murdered, I don't know how they work it. Police finally thought they had found Cunanan. So he had been like on the loose for this, 8 or 9 days. He was found on a houseboat that actually belonged to a German businessman.
It's always a houseboat.
Right. Named Torsten Rieneck, who was actually a fugitive from Germany. He was wanted on fraud charges, but he's in the U.S., just living it up. And he was actually in Las Vegas at the time. And his caretaker, named Fernando Carrera, happened to come in and stop to check on the houseboat. And he went inside and he spotted some things that were kind of out of place. And then he heard a gunshot. He ran out and immediately called the police. Authorities concluded that Cunanan had happened upon the houseboat, and obviously he needed a place to hide out. And he had been living there for those days he had been missing.
And he just happened to pick that.
Right. It probably was just looked abandoned, like no one was on it, stuff like that. A SWAT team came. They threw a tear gas canister into the boat to smoke him out. Eventually, they found him dead inside. He had pretty much blown his face off, so they needed to identify him by his fingerprints. The standoff actually took like 12 hours. Like, they didn't know. I feel like he was dead, but they didn't know. So there was like this long extended period where everyone thought he was just inside
With a gun.
Yeah. And as I mentioned before, he shot himself with the same gun he used to kill not only Gianni Versace, but all of the other victims. And it was a gun that he had taken from his first victim, Jeff
Well,
Trail.
just the one guy who died by a gunshot.
Well, he killed Versace, Reese, and Madsen with the gun. Only one guy died by the hammer.
What about the guy who was stabbed with the screwdriver?
Oh,
the
right.
old guy.
That's right. The old guy. Sorry.
Okay.
Right. He wasn't killed by the gun. He was killed by others.
So he killed 3 people.
3 people with the same gun, but he killed himself. Sorry. Anyways.
Anyway.
He was. Oh yeah. I'm sorry, Kathy. Don't yell at me. In the comments. Kathy's really mad at me because I say anyways sometimes. I actually know not to do that, but I don't know why I do it. I'm trash. I'm sorry. I'm lovable trash.
I got humiliated once when I was a teenager for saying anyways, so I've never said it since
I actually
then.
don't feel like I say it, but apparently I do. I don't really fucking care. I mean, it doesn't really matter.
Well, maybe you'll know now.
And I still don't care. Sorry, Kathy. I love you.
Desi's a surprise.
Thanks for your Patreon donation.
We love all our listeners.
Yeah, you can criticize me, but I probably won't listen to unless it's like a really serious one. but no.
I want to know what that serious one
I
would
would
have
love
to
to
be.
find out too.
I would love to find that out.
Please keep going. So far, no one's found it. So Andrew was cremated, and he is actually interred at the Mausoleum of Holy Cross Catholic Cemetery in San Diego, California. Versace was also cremated, and his ashes were buried in Cernovio, Italy, in his family vault. He had a really big funeral at the Milan Cathedral, which was attended by a bunch of celebrities, including Elton John and Princess Diana.
Wow.
Do you remember
just
the
a
funeral?
few months?
Yeah.
Yeah, just a few months before
Right.
she died.
Right.
And
I
I'm
actually
sure-
remember, yeah, I mean, it's crazy.
And all the supermodels were there.
Right. And as I said before, directly after this, police said they had no idea why Versace or why he was killed. Because Andrew Cunanan left no suicide note, like no anything, no manifesto. Like it was just over and done. Like
Right. It was a true spree.
Right. This is definitely like a spree killer.
Yeah.
So, motive. There has been a lot of speculation about what his ultimate motive was. As I said before, his first victim was his best friend. His second victim was the love of his life. And then there's the older man in Chicago. We don't really quite know what his thing, but he was supposedly, he was married and supposedly very Catholic. So I don't know if people are speculating that there was some kind of secret gay something going on there, but I don't know.
Or if it was an opportunistic kill in which
Right.
he just needed a place to crash.
Who knows?
I don't know.
So, according to this Maureen Orth, she believes that he came to represent all older men he had in his life. He was like these older men that he was an escort and companion with.
Yeah.
Except for the fourth murder, which was obviously just to get the car. Orth also said his getaway car was in a public garage for 4 or 5 weeks while he was on the lam, and he was living in a Fleabag hotel and hustling at night, going to gay discos, getting money, like before he killed Versace. There was like a few months. According to her, he always had an obsession with Versace because, like Versace, Andrew was gay and out his whole life, so he had some kind of to that aspect of Versace.
It's a pretty
for some
thin
reason.
connection.
Yeah. He was and this is a quote from Orth, he was a narcissist, a con artist, a liar, and felt extremely entitled. He didn't want to work for a living, and Versace seemed to have everything that he himself felt he deserved: fame, recognition. I think Versace embodied everything Cunanan wanted to be. However, he wasn't willing to work for it.
Right.
This is like narcissist 101, like
Right.
with this sense of entitlement and illusions of grandeur, like you
Yeah.
think you deserve
Yeah.
all of this nonsense. Another sort of, this is so 90s also to me. People initially, another rumor after all of this happened was that he was HIV positive and he had nothing to live for, so he was going out and killing gay people. He was actually HIV negative, so that was like a complete. I actually remember hearing that.
I can't believe I was probably too young, but I don't. That is like the biggest.
But it's so 90s,
insulting
right? Like
load of
where
crap.
people were like, "Oh, only someone who had AIDS would do this," like as if everyone who had AIDS was
Or HIV
positive was going out killing people, because it's like, who cares? Like, I mean, it's just so
gross.
Yeah. So as I said before, there was no suicide note found. There were some weird things that they did find. Considering how money hungry he was and what a con artist, there was nothing really of value found. But they did find multiple tubes of hydrocortisone cream and an extensive collection of C.S. Lewis fiction. I'm sorry.
Wait, itch cream and Narnia books?
Yeah, like,
Why?
I have no idea. I just thought that was weird.
That's fucking weird.
So in the aftermath of this, Santo, the brother, became CEO of Gianni Versace, the company. His sister Donatella became the new head of design. In the will, Gianni left 50% of his fashion empire to his niece Allegra. Her brother Daniel got some artwork, and Allegra would inherit her stake, which was approximately $500 million when she turned 18.
Wow.
Versace also left his boyfriend with a lifelong pension of 50 million lire a month, which was about $26,000, and the right to live in any of his homes in Italy and the United States. Versace's family actually interfered in that and gave him a fraction of what Gianni wanted for him, which
That's
I find
really
very
weird.
fucking fucked up.
It is
because he
fucked up.
wasn't just like someone who was in his life the last year.
That guy was in his life for decades.
Yeah, since
care
1982,
of
so
him.
almost 20 years. So it kind of made me like, fuck you, Donatella.
Wait,
Fuck you.
Donatella was part
the
of it?
family, and they're the two main inherit.
I was thinking like his mom and dad, but I guess they weren't
No,
alive.
it was like the brother and the sister. I just find that really fucked up.
That is because they
Anyways.
obviously knew him.
Also, they have a ton of money. Like, what?
What do they need?
Ugh, I'm so irritated. Anyways, anyway,
You will always remember.
now I'm like
you will
obsessed.
always remember.
God.
No, it's fine because there was the thing like when we first started, and like we've forgotten about that.
Right. It's
Somebody's-
really hard. Listen, you get on a microphone and speak and have your voice and your words analyzed. You won't be happy.
You know what? You're right. It's not easy.
I try.
always.
Well, you don't realize you have weird little tics, and it's only noticeable when you're recorded. Like if I'm just talking to you, you're not like focusing on. Anyways,
It's actually a miracle because I like will listen back to the show immediately after we record it, just in case there's any weird sound things like
Right.
that are like really egregious or whatever. Like, and sometimes it's painful. I'm like, ugh, I sound like that.
right.
But
At least we haven't been accused of vocal fry. I mean, that's the big one, right?
which here's the reality. I know I've done vocal fry plenty of times on the show before, and you know what? I don't really give a shit.
Yeah.
I don't even
Come on.
care.
None of us are perfect. Anyways, sorry. Jesus Christ. Ugh, I hate myself.
Desi's-
Thank you, Kathy. Now I
Desi-
fucking hate myself.
Desi's turning red like a little strawberry shortcake.
Another interesting thing is that this woman, Maureen Orth, who I have mentioned a lot, the article I read is a Vanity Fair article that goes really in depth into Andrew Cunanan's life, and it's really interesting. She was actually working on this before Versace's murder.
What?
She was following the case already, just based on it being like a crazy spree killing, and that he was America's, top 10 most wanted criminal.
And then he happens to kill.
And while she was working on the article and about to finish it up, and they were actually fact checking the article, so that's like at the end after she's written it. And that was when Versace was killed in Miami. Her editors asked her, hey, someone killed Versace. Do you think that this is your guy? At that moment, the police weren't entering or releasing the name of the shooter yet. And Orth speculates that because they didn't do that right away, that was sort of how he escaped. Like,
Because people didn't know to look for him?
right?
Or who knew him in Miami?
I don't know. Right? Yeah. So as I mentioned before, this week, I think Wednesday, season 2 of American Crime Story starts, and it's called The Assassination of Gianni Versace. Cunanan is going to be played by Darren Criss from Glee. Penelope Cruz will be playing Donatella.
What do you think about that casting?
I feel like they should have gotten someone more.
First of all, I think Lady Gaga looks a lot more like
She's
Donatella.
probably too young, right? Like Penelope Cruz is like what, in her early 40s?
But Lady Gaga can play older.
Right, she can.
I just think that they have a more distinct Italian look that they share.
Right.
Gaga and
Yeah. No, I feel
Donatella.
like
They
that's
look
good.
more similar. I think, whatever, Penelope Cruz, I have nothing against her as a human being or as an actor.
I don't know.
I just think it was a weird casting
Yeah.
for some reason. But who knows? Maybe she's going to be great. I haven't seen the show yet, obviously.
Ricky Martin plays the longtime boyfriend.
I'm excited to see that.
Judith Light is also in it.
You can't have a gay production without
I don't
Judith
think
Light.
so. She's described as playing the tightly wound wife of one of Cunanan's deeply closeted tricks. And I wonder if they're talking about the guy who was killed in
How
Chicago.
big of a role is that?
I have no idea. And Versace is played by a Venezuelan actor named Edgar Ramirez. We should post some pictures of
We'll
the
post
casting
side-by-sides.
because I've seen some side-by-sides in some of these articles. Now, here's the interesting thing that I was going to touch upon. According to Ryan Murphy, who is the producer of this show, he specifically wrote Assassination of Gianni Versace for a reason rather than murder. He thinks that this is a political murder, not in political like he was, the government tried to assassinate him.
Like it was a political statement?
Yes. He thinks that that Cunanan targeted people specifically to shame them and to out them and to have a form of payback for a life that he felt he could not live. He also claims that Cunanan was on FBI's most wanted list, and that was circulated openly in Miami Beach before Versace was killed. And nothing was stopped because the story had a gay connection. Like, his theory is that the police didn't take it as seriously because it was sort of like, oh, it's just gay people, which people actually kind of made the same accusation against the Jeffrey Dahmer police, like because it was gay men being
They were
murdered,
men of color too,
and men of color, that people didn't care as much. And I mean, I guess across the board, people of color being killed or marginalized groups being killed don't get the same attention as like a little white girl being killed. So that's what he means by political. Also, Ramirez, who plays Versace, this is a quote from him: "The underlying subject is homophobia and how homophobia killed him. That's something that comes up over and over again when we look into the investigation. Cunanan was on the news every night, on the most wanted list, and for some reason, all the law enforcement authorities couldn't get him."
And he was pretty sloppy with his trail.
Right. And I don't know. I'm curious. It makes me curious to see the show because this is an angle that I didn't see. And I probably read, like, including Wikipedia, like 10 articles, and some of them were freaking long. You guys, I'm just saying. So it's kind of like an interesting...
That's an angle I've never heard before that I never considered.
Right. And it is an interesting...
For this story.
It's an interesting take. So it does kind of make me curious. And we'll probably both be watching it and maybe talk about it week by week if you guys want to join in. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Wow.
I did a lot, right?
That was a lot of work.
Yeah.
Desi.
Some of these articles were so long, I was like, oh my God, but I kept like finding things.
Whenever there's a Vanity Fair article though from like back in the day, I always read it.
They're so good.
They're so good.
Well, they're really usually written in like a very entertaining way.
Yeah. Like the Heidi Fleiss Vanity Fair article that I found.
And I think I did one for the Martha Moxley too.
Yeah, they're always really good.
So should I read off our
Wait, do you want to hear my dad's Versace
Oh yeah,
story?
definitely. Go ahead.
I've like hyped it up so much it's not interesting.
I forgot, yeah.
All that happened was that over Christmas break, Brendan and I walked into my aunt and uncle's house where my dad was. This was on Christmas Day, and my dad's wearing this like electric blue tweed jacket, like a blazer,
right?
Like a suit jacket or whatever. And Brendan's like, "Oh, that's a cool jacket." And my dad's like, "This is Gianni Versace. Do you know when I bought this? Versace had just died, and I was in Milan, and everyone in the store was just crying."
And he's like, "Do you have us in a 32?"
I know. I was like, "What kind of transaction was that?" I was like, "I'm really sorry, like about Gianni.
Can I pay?
But can I buy this right now?"
Yeah, that's hilarious.
Yeah, that's the story. It told you it wasn't interesting.
It's
but it's a really nice jacket. You can take a look at it on my Instagram.
Okay.
If you'll see
sure
me with my dad, a picture of us a few pictures back.
Okay, so I'm gonna just thank some of our new patrons. I don't know how to say that word. Kathy, come on, Kathy. Correct.
I feel bad we're singling out Kathy. I
love Kathy. I was so drunk too when she said that to me. First of all, she's really sweet. Okay,
I know.
She did it in a sweet way. She's a grammar Nazi or whatever you want to call it.
So is my mom. My mom will text me things that I tweet, and it's so humiliating.
But she was really sweet. I was like literally so wasted. I'm not proud of that. When I saw that, and I was just kind of like, hey. So me and Kathy are fine. Kathy's cool.
I like Kathy.
She gets it. So let's thank our new patrons. I might have some overlap here because I can't remember where I left off. We have Tara. Thank you, Tara. Brittany, Rachel, Jewel, Ambrose, Christy. Oh no, she just left a comment. Sorry, no. Thank you to you, Christy. Thank you.
I want to thank Christiane because she left a really sweet comment.
Oh, cool. Yeah, thank you. Kelly. Kelly's my girl. We have Amy, Alyssa, or Elisa, Judy, Bronwyn, Chelsea, Krista, Andrew, Ashley Marie, Megan, Kathy, my girl Kathy, Holly, who's also my girl, and we just got one from. I'm sorry, I hope I don't say your name wrong. Tamim, Tamim.
Please rake Desi over the coals for horrific pronunciation.
Find me on Instagram. Find a picture of my food and fucking tear my ass open for a grammar thing, like Kathy. Kathy was like on my chili picture.
I love that it was a picture of your chili.
I can't remember what it was, but it was something completely like not related to the podcast. It was just like, hey, I love you.
I fucking love Kathy.
Yeah. Kathy, yes. Kathy is down. Kathy, look at all this attention you've gotten for calling me out. I love it.
I also want to say really quick just about comments and stuff we've gotten. We got a really this stood out to me. I don't know. I must be hormonal or something because you can ask Brendan. I started to like tear up and cry, but we got a really sweet iTunes review comment. Like it was just our most recent one. So I read it last night and it was from a woman. She's like, I'm so much older than you gals, but I feel like we're friends. And you know what? We are friends.
Aww.
But it totally, like, I just want you to know
sweet.
that it wasn't your real name you left, but it was so sweet.
Oh, I didn't see that one.
You said you were 60s, but that we were like friends. I'm like, we are friends.
Yes.
So yeah, thank you for that.
So if you want to be even closer friends, check out the Facebook group that we've referenced a few times. Because we will be talking about this case a lot, probably the next 10 weeks, I guess. And we talk about other things on the show, but they're all sort of in the vein of Hollywood or crime, or about the shows.
Yeah.
And it's a fun group, and there's lots of cool people. We post pictures and videos, and other people have their own stories, and they make suggestions.
Hollywood Crime Scene Friends on Facebook. That's what it's called.
And then we have social accounts, obviously Twitter and Instagram.
Everything's called Hollywood Crime Scene.
I think that's it.
That's it.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, bye.
I don't want no meat. Just more taters.